What's going on? Welcome to Unlocking Your Inner Strength. In these episodes, I share with you insights and inspirations that have come to me on my path in life, and hopefully they can be a welcome hand of guidance as you move along your journey. I teach because I'm passionate about my message. I teach because it helps me to learn more deeply. Thanks for sharing a few minutes of your time with me for this week's episode, and without further ado, here is this week's show. What's up, everybody? Time for another episode. Trying to catch back up after being away for a couple weeks. And while the family's out on the river with the kayaks, which I would have liked to have done, but I knew I had to catch up on some work, I'm going to record another episode here. This is episode 267 of Unlocking Your Inner Strength. And I'm going to keep it simple today. Yesterday, I was out pulling some weeds before we, in between social gatherings, as I said, before we went to our last party last night. And when we got back from vacation, the garden that we had recently started, all of a sudden, boom, all these weeds in there. So it goes like 2 weeks without me tending to it. All these things pop up. I'm trying to distinguish what is a weed, what is actually growth from the seeds we planted. But nonetheless, I was pulling weeds yesterday for about 2 hours, and there's a lot of lessons in pulling weeds. Pulling weeds is something I would have despised even a few years ago. Waste of time, right? I would have looked at it as. So the thoughts that were going through my head, I'm going to share with you as I was pulling these weeds. The first thing is I enjoy my time now outside when I'm doing stuff that could be menial like that, when my hands are touching the dirt and I'm tending to the garden, the literal garden, because it's a great analogy just for life, right? You got to tend to it, you got to get after it. And as I'm going, it started out in my head being like, well, what's the point of these weeds? Why do we have these weeds here? What's the purpose? And the first thought I had is maybe the purpose is to just pull the weeds. Maybe that's all there is to be present in what you're doing and be where you're at rather than trying to rush through this. So there's no rush. There's the saying, no hurries and no worries. And I just had the music on in the background, pulling weeds, getting a little tan going. But maybe the purpose was just to be there pulling the weeds, nothing more than that. And sometimes that's all that is required of us, is be where you're at, do what you're doing. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing, some of the weeds, and I was showing Braxton when he helped me pull out a few, come out very easily when you're pulling weeds because the root system has not gone deep. Sometimes the root system is developed, but it goes wide, right? Like it just spreads out wide. I noticed that yesterday. They still come out very easily because you need to be planted deep in the soil, have firm roots, right? And all this, right, is kind of an analogy for life. You need to be of good soil. You need to have deep roots, not wide roots. Go deep with what you're doing. Don't try to be the jack of all trades. And now you do have some weeds that have been around for much longer, and they do have deeper roots, much harder to uproot and get out. Weeds, though I looked up, actually serve a purpose. They help to break up the soil, right? They help to make it so it can be cultivated and you can grow crops there, and you can grow edible things there or flowers, whatever you're trying to do. But they do serve a purpose as the root system goes down, breaks up the soil, makes it so it's more readily usable. So weeds do have a purpose. Constantly, right? I was gone 2 weeks. You need to constantly, if you're going to weed, do it. You have to constantly weed. You can't just do it once a year. That's not how it works. Just like weeds can grow in your mind. Right? If you let a weed grow in your mind, it might grow deeper roots. It might be harder to overcome. You got to constantly go through the garden of your mind, take the weeds out, recognize the weeds, implant new stuff in there, right? So for your mind, it's books, it's visualization, it's meditation, it's good conversation. But it's putting good thoughts into your mind. In your mind, when you get weeds, usually it's a negative thing, right? And it kind of grows in, and it could stop the growth of your full potential, just like the weeds in the garden can stop the growth of the crops that we're trying to grow. So constant maintenance, both physically, literally, and figuratively. When we're talking about your mind, you gotta tend to the weeds. You gotta get them out, and realize that weeds are there to serve a purpose. Right? When we're talking about the mind, just like physical weeds can break up the soil and allow new things to grow, when you have mental weeds and head trash, they're there to serve a purpose for you. And with them, you have to use them as a blessing to become stronger. It's like a resistance training for your mind. When you get weeds in your mind, it's like resistance training. You need to figure out how to root them out. You need to figure out what the lesson is, right? There's always a lesson. What are you supposed to learn? That's something I ask Devin a lot when she brings stuff up to me. It's okay, maybe there's something to learn here. What is there to learn for you? What are you supposed to be getting out of this type of thing? But you can learn lessons with whatever you are doing. There's lessons to be learned when you slow down and just observe and be present. Going back to the first thing I talked about, sometimes it's just about being present, seeing what comes to you, right? There's something about being in the moment. One of the things I was reading when I was on vacation, the guy was talking about you have to do everything in your power to banish the disease of being hurried, right? So hurriedness, being hurried, constantly hurried. One of my favorite quotes that I mention often is, there's more to life than simply increasing the speed of it. So in the past, I would have looked at pulling the weeds as a waste of my time. I got all this other stuff to do. And there was plenty of other stuff I could have done yesterday, but sat outside for a little bit, got up out of my chair, and said, okay, it's time to weed. And that's what I was doing. I was weeding. I was in no rush. I embraced it. And then when you go back to the garden, right, and again, use this however you want, literally or figuratively. When you go back to the garden, and eventually it does produce stuff that you can eat and that can provide for your family, knowing that you took the time to tend to it and make it the best that you possibly could, you're watering the good stuff, pulling the weeds and the bad stuff, working on the soil, it makes you much more connected to the entire process. When you're going through life, if you had no worries and you had nothing to really struggle through, let's say every day, every moment, you knew it was going to happen, you were never going to face adversity, then I can tell you that you were also not going to grow. You were not going to grow, right? So you got to embrace it. You got to embrace the weeds that come up in your mind and realize that you can deal with them much easier the quicker you get to them. The longer you let them go, the tougher time you're going to have, but it can still be done. So that's pretty much the short episode I wanted to record for today. It's just lessons I picked up from weeding yesterday. And I think, just like I always said, the gym is the greatest classroom to me, right? Being in the gym throughout my life, hitting the weights, pushing through, forging through, observing other people. The world, your everyday life is the best classroom. Whatever you're doing, be there. See what you can learn from how it applies to other areas of your life. See, how you can find beauty in the things that are menial, that you think are menial, and that don't really matter. Because moment by moment is all you got. We all think we have this grand thing out in the future. We live for someday, somewhere. Just be where you're at. Be where you're at. Enjoy the day with your family today if you're off. And thanks for all the support. Hit the like button, hit the thumbs up button if you can. And I'll be back later in the week with another episode. Don't forget to go to kylenewell.com. Get on my email list for Kyle Newell. That's a different one than the Newell Strength one. You'll be pleased that you did. All right, everybody. Peace. You wrote for today's episode. I appreciate you and your time, truly. I'm humbled and honored if you made it to the end of this episode. Don't forget, you can go to kylenewell.com for your free ebook written by yours truly on getting started with fasting, infused with 5 mind map principles never before seen. This is something I have not given out to anybody else. that'll help you see the light when it comes to your fasting journey and creating better health, both physically and internally. Remember, it's all about the mind, body, and spirit. Until next week, peace.